Most men assume it's just age. They tell themselves it's normal. They tell themselves everyone goes through this. But here's what very few men ever stop to consider. What if it isn't about age at all? What if there's a specific biological shift happening inside your body right now? A shift that most doctors never mention during a routine checkup. And what if understanding that shift could change how you feel, how you perform, and how you show up every single day? Stay with me for the next few minutes, because what you're about to hear isn't a magic solution. It's an explanation, a real one. And by the end of this video, you're going to understand your own body in a way that most men your age never do. And one simple habit may influence this more than most men realize. Let's start with something honest. If you're a man between 40 and 70, there's a good chance you've noticed something changing. Maybe it started gradually. So gradually that you almost didn't catch it at first. A little less energy in the morning, a little less sharpness, a feeling that your body isn't responding the way it used to. Maybe you wake up and the first thought isn't excitement. It's effort. It takes more to get going, more coffee, more time. And even then, there's this low-level fatigue underneath everything that doesn't fully go away. And then there are the moments that hit harder. You're with your partner. The moment feels right. And then something shifts. A hesitation. A pressure in your chest. Not physical pain, but something quieter than that. A kind of internal silence where confidence used to live. You don't say anything. She might not say anything either, but you feel it. That gap between who you were and who you feel like right now. That's not weakness. That's not failure. That is biology. And biology can be understood. Here's what most men never realize. That feeling of slowing down, of losing edge, of watching your performance and confidence fade, it often traces back to one specific molecule. A molecule that researchers are paying more and more attention to. A molecule that begins to decline in men after the age of 40, sometimes earlier. And here's where things start to get interesting. The molecule is called nitric oxide. Now, before your eyes glaze over at a scientific term, stay with me. Because this is actually simple. And once you understand it, a lot of things about your body will start to make sense. Nitric oxide is not a supplement. It's not something you take directly. It's something your body produces, or at least it's supposed to produce. It's a molecule that your blood vessels generate naturally, and its primary job is communication. Specifically, it tells the muscles lining your blood vessels to relax, to open up, to allow blood to flow freely. Think of it like this. Imagine your circulatory system as a network of pipes running through your entire body. Pipes that carry oxygen, nutrients, everything your cells need to function. Now imagine that over time, those pipes begin to narrow slightly. The walls stiffen, the pressure changes, flow becomes restricted, not completely blocked, just reduced, enough to matter, enough to affect how you feel, how you think, how you perform. That narrowing, that restriction. That's what happens when nitric oxide levels decline. And that's what many researchers and cardiovascular specialists are now paying close attention to, the relationship between nitric oxide, blood vessel health, and the gradual changes men experience after 40. But here's what most men never hear about. Nitric oxide doesn't just affect one system. It affects everything that depends on circulation. Your heart, your muscles, your brain, your sexual function. All of these systems depend on healthy blood flow. And healthy blood flow depends in large part on how well your body is producing and maintaining nitric oxide. When production starts to drop, and research suggests it does begin declining in most men somewhere in their 40s, the effects aren't always sudden or dramatic. They're subtle, gradual, easy to dismiss, a little more fatigue during exercise, a little longer recovery time, a little less power during physical activity, a little less clarity after a long day, a little less confidence in intimate moments. And because these changes are gradual, most men chalk them up to aging, to stress, to being busy, to life. But what researchers are increasingly observing is that these changes aren't simply inevitable. They're often connected to specific physiological processes that can be understood, and in many cases, supported. In a moment, you'll see exactly why this matters. Let's talk about what actually causes nitric oxide to decline. First, age itself plays a role. The cells lining your blood vessels, called endothelial cells, are responsible for producing nitric oxide. And as men get older, these cells become less efficient. They produce less. It's a natural biological shift, but it's not the only factor. Second, diet matters enormously. Nitric oxide production depends heavily on certain amino acids, specifically L-Arginine and L-Citrulline. These are compounds your body uses as raw materials to synthesize nitric oxide. When your diet doesn't provide enough of these compounds, and most modern Western diets don't, production suffers. Third, physical activity, or more accurately the lack of it. Movement stimulates the endothelial cells to produce more nitric oxide. A more sedentary lifestyle means less stimulation. Less stimulation means less production. It's a feedback loop. And fourth, something that almost no one talks about, oxidative stress. As men age, the balance between free radicals and antioxidants in the body tends to shift. More oxidative stress means that the nitric oxide that is being produced gets broken down faster. So you end up with less available, even when production stays the same. Now here's where this becomes really interesting. Researchers have noticed something fascinating when they look at men who maintain strong cardiovascular health well into their 50s, 60s, even 70s. There are consistent patterns. These men tend to have better endothelial function, better blood vessel flexibility, and measurably better nitric oxide signaling. What does that tell us? It tells us that decline is not destiny, that biology can be influenced, that the body, given the right support, has more capacity than most men realize. And here's the thing that changes everything when you understand it. The body is always looking for an opportunity to restore balance. The cells in your blood vessels are constantly responding to their environment, to what you eat, to how you move, to what compounds are available in your bloodstream. Which means the story isn't over, not even close. Let's talk about what's actually happening in the body during those moments that shake a man's confidence. Because I want you to understand this on a physiological level, not because it's just interesting, but because understanding removes shame. And shame is often the thing that keeps men from doing anything about it. When a man experiences difficulty with sexual performance, whether it's maintaining an erection, sustaining energy, or simply not feeling the drive he once had, the most common underlying factor is vascular. It's blood flow, not psychology, not weakness, not aging in some mysterious, unstoppable way. It's the fact that sufficient blood flow to the relevant tissue requires nitric oxide to signal the vessel walls to relax. When nitric oxide levels are lower, that relaxation is incomplete. The flow is reduced. The response is weaker. This is why men who support their cardiovascular health often report improvements in intimate performance as well. Not because there's some separate system for sexual health, but because it's the same system. Circulation, blood flow, vascular function. The man who feels confident in the bedroom is very often the man whose circulatory system is functioning well, and the man who struggles in those moments is very often dealing with reduced vascular signaling. Not a character flaw, a biological reality, over months, sometimes years. If this process continues without support, the gap widens, the confidence erodes further, the avoidance grows, and what started as a physical issue starts to become an emotional one. Anxiety, withdrawal, distance in relationships, the slow erosion of a man's sense of himself. But here's something most men completely overlook. The moment you understand what's driving this, you stop blaming yourself, and you start asking better questions. Not, what's wrong with me, but what does my body actually need to function the way it's designed to function? That's a different question, and it leads to different answers, because once you understand that this is largely a vascular issue, driven by declining nitric oxide production, you can approach it the way you'd approach any other physiological challenge. With information, with consistency, with support. Let's talk about what that support looks like. The most well-studied pathway for supporting nitric oxide production naturally runs through two specific amino acids. The first is L-Arginine. L-Arginine is the direct precursor to nitric oxide. Your body takes L-Arginine and through a process involving an enzyme called nitric oxide synthase, converts it into nitric oxide. More L-Arginine available in the bloodstream, more raw material for production. The second is L-Citrulline, and this one is actually more interesting than most people expect. When you consume L-Arginine directly, a significant portion of it gets broken down in the digestive tract before it ever reaches your bloodstream. The bioavailability isn't ideal, but when you consume L-Citrulline, your body converts it into L-Arginine in the kidneys in a way that bypasses that digestive breakdown. The result is actually a more sustained and effective increase in blood L-Arginine levels than taking L-Arginine alone. This is what researchers have observed in multiple studies, and it's why L-Citrulline has become one of the more interesting compounds in the conversation about cardiovascular and vascular support. And remember that molecule we mentioned at the beginning, nitric oxide, the one responsible for signaling your blood vessels to relax. L-Citrulline and L-Arginine work together directly upstream of that process. They are the building blocks of the very molecule your vascular system needs. Now here's where things get even more interesting. There's another compound that researchers are paying close attention to in the context of men's health and circulation, and it's been used in traditional medicine for centuries before modern science started examining it closely. Panax ginseng, also known as Korean ginseng. Ginseng contains active compounds called ginsenosides, and what researchers have observed is that these compounds appear to support nitric oxide production through a slightly different pathway by influencing the activity of the enzyme nitric oxide synthase directly. In other words, ginseng may help the body produce more nitric oxide even from existing L-Arginine. There's also research suggesting that ginseng supports energy levels at the cellular level, specifically related to mitochondrial function, which is how your cells generate and use energy. Men who feel chronically fatigued often have some degree of mitochondrial inefficiency, and that's a different conversation from pure circulation, but it's a related one, because energy and blood flow are connected in very practical ways. If your cells aren't getting enough oxygen and nutrients due to reduced circulation, they can't produce energy efficiently. And if your mitochondria aren't functioning optimally, you feel it as fatigue, brain fog, and a general sense of running below your capacity. Ginseng, L-Citrulline, L-Arginine, these aren't magic, but they represent three of the most studied natural compounds in the space of vascular support, energy, and male vitality. And this is where things start to become very practical. Here's a question most men ask at this point. Can't I just get these from food? It's a fair question, and the honest answer is yes to a degree, but often not in the amounts that actually move the needle. L-Arginine is found in protein-rich foods, chicken, beef, fish, nuts, legumes, but the amounts vary, and the absorption varies even more. By the time protein goes through digestion, amino acids compete with each other for absorption. The actual amount of L-Arginine reaching your bloodstream from a typical meal is much lower than the total content of the food. L-Citrulline is found most abundantly in watermelon, but here's the math. You would need to eat several pounds of watermelon per day to get the amounts that research suggests may meaningfully support nitric oxide production. Not exactly practical. And ginseng is not a staple of the Western diet at all. Men in the United States and Europe simply don't consume meaningful amounts through regular food. This is why supplementation becomes a conversation worth having. Not as a replacement for a healthy lifestyle, but as a way to fill the gap between what the body needs and what modern diet and lifestyle actually provide. And remember, this isn't about shortcuts. This is about consistency, about giving your body the raw materials it needs consistently over time, because biology responds to consistency, not to occasional effort, not to one-time doses, but to a sustained, reliable supply of what your system is looking for. In a moment, you'll understand why that consistency makes such a significant difference. Let me be direct about something. The changes most men experience after 40, the fatigue, the reduced drive, the performance hesitations, the quiet erosion of confidence, these are real. They are physiologically grounded. They are not in your head, but they are also not inevitable in the way that most men assume. What many experts in men's health are observing is that the men who maintain the strongest vitality as they age are the men who are proactive, not reactive. They don't wait until the problem is severe. They don't wait until the gap in confidence becomes a chasm. They start understanding their body earlier. They start supporting their biology with intention. And here's what that looks like in practical terms. It starts with circulation. Because circulation is the foundation of everything. Your heart pumps, your blood flows, your tissues receive oxygen and nutrients, your cells produce energy, your muscles perform, your brain stays sharp. And yes, your sexual function works the way it's designed to work. All of that runs on circulation. And circulation runs on nitric oxide. So when you understand that nitric oxide production declines with age, that L-Citrulline and L-Arginine are the most direct nutritional precursors to that molecule, and that compounds like Panax ginseng can provide additional support to the production pathway, you're not guessing anymore. You're working with your biology instead of against it. That's what this is really about. Now I want to take a moment and talk about the psychological side of this, because I think it matters. When a man starts experiencing these changes, the fatigue, the performance concerns, the quiet sense that something has shifted, there's often a very predictable internal experience that follows. First, denial. It's fine, it's temporary, it'll pass. Then frustration. Why is this happening? What's wrong with me? Then avoidance. If I don't acknowledge it, maybe it won't be real. And finally, isolation. This is something I can't talk about. Not with my friends, not with my doctor, maybe not even with my partner. And in that isolation, the story a man tells himself about what's happening grows darker than the reality. He starts to believe that this is permanent, that this is who he is now, that the best years are behind him. And that story, that quiet internal narrative, becomes more damaging than the physical change that triggered it. Here's what I want you to take from this video more than anything else. Understanding what is actually happening in your body is the most powerful thing you can do. Because once you understand the mechanism, once you see that this is a vascular and biochemical process, not a verdict on your worth as a man, the shame loses its grip. You're not less of a man because your nitric oxide production has declined. You're a man whose body needs specific support to continue performing at its best. That's a solvable problem, not a life sentence. And here's the part that most men never hear. The body responds. That's the part men forget when they're deep in that story of decline. The body is not static. It's always adapting, always responding to inputs. Give it the right environment, the right nutrients, the right movement, the right support, and it will respond. Maybe not overnight, but over time, consistently and meaningfully. Men in their 50s and 60s who take their vascular health seriously often describe a remarkable shift, not just in physical performance, but in confidence, in energy, in the way they carry themselves, in the quality of their relationships, in the sense that they are still moving forward, still growing, not shrinking. That's available to you, not through some dramatic overhaul of your entire life, but through understanding, through consistency, through giving your body what it needs. Now let's talk about what a practical approach to this actually looks like. First, movement. Vascular health responds to physical activity more than almost anything else. You don't need to run marathons. You don't need 2-hour gym sessions. But consistent moderate exercise, walking, cycling, resistance training, directly stimulates endothelial function and nitric oxide production. 30 minutes most days is a meaningful starting point. Second, diet. Shifting toward foods that support vascular health makes a measurable difference. Dark leafy greens, spinach, arugula, beet greens are high in dietary nitrates, which the body converts into nitric oxide through a separate pathway from the amino acid route. Beets and beet juice are particularly well studied in this context. And reducing processed foods, refined sugars, and excessive alcohol removes some of the oxidative burden that degrades nitric oxide before it can do its work. Third, sleep. This one is chronically underappreciated. Most nitric oxide production and vascular repair happens during sleep. Men who consistently sleep less than 6 or 7 hours show measurable reductions in endothelial function compared to men who sleep 7 to 8. Sleep is not a luxury. For vascular health specifically, it is a critical biological process. Fourth, stress management. Chronic psychological stress elevates cortisol. Elevated cortisol promotes vasoconstriction, the narrowing of blood vessels, and impairs endothelial function. The relationship between mental stress and physical vascular health is direct and well documented. Practices that reduce chronic stress, whether that's meditation, time in nature, social connection, or simply regular periods of genuine rest, have measurable effects on circulatory function. And fifth, targeted nutritional support. This is where the conversation about L-Citrulline, L-Arginine, and Panax Ginseng becomes practically relevant. As I mentioned earlier, modern Western diets often don't provide adequate amounts of these compounds to meaningfully support nitric oxide production, especially as the body's own production capacity declines with age. This is not a flaw in the design of the human body. It's a mismatch between what our biology evolved to receive and what modern life actually provides. For men who want to address that gap consistently, supplementation offers a practical pathway, not to replace lifestyle choices, but to work alongside them. To give the body the raw materials it needs, even on days when diet isn't perfect. Even when a man is traveling or under stress or simply unable to eat with the precision that optimal vascular support would ideally require. L-Citrulline, specifically, has been studied in the context of cardiovascular support, exercise performance, and endothelial function. Researchers have observed its ability to raise blood L-Arginine levels more effectively than L-Arginine supplementation alone. L-Arginine provides additional direct substrate for nitric oxide production, and Panax Ginseng contributes to the enzymatic pathway that drives synthesis, while also supporting energy at the cellular level. Together, these compounds represent a nutritional approach to vascular support that is grounded in how the body actually works, not in marketing language, not in exaggerated claims, in physiology. And remember what we said earlier about consistency. The body responds to what it receives reliably over time. These aren't compounds where you take them once and notice a dramatic effect. They work gradually, cumulatively, the way biology actually functions. For men who want to explore a natural way to support this process, there's a resource available in the description below. It outlines what to look for in a quality supplement designed around these compounds, what the research suggests about dosing and formulation, and how to approach this as part of a broader strategy for men's health after 40. No pressure. No obligation. Just information for men who want to take this seriously. Let me close with this. You are not at the end of something. You are at the beginning of a different kind of understanding. Most men spend their 40s and 50s confused about what's happening in their bodies. They feel the changes but don't know why. They try to push through. They ignore the signals, and the gap between who they feel like and who they want to be grows quietly wider. But you now understand something that most men don't. You understand that much of what you're feeling traces back to a specific biological process, a process involving circulation, involving nitric oxide, involving the health of your blood vessels and the cells that line them. And you understand that this process can be supported, naturally, consistently, without dramatic interventions, without giving up on the life you want to live. The man who feels strong, confident, energetic, and vital in his 50s and 60s is not just lucky. He is informed. He is intentional. He understands his body, and he works with it. That can be you. Not through perfection. Not through massive overnight changes, but through understanding what your body needs and giving it that consistently over time. Small shifts, sustained over weeks and months. That's where real change lives. You still have a great deal to give. To yourself, to your partner, to everyone who depends on you. And your body, given the right support, has more capacity than you might currently believe. Don't let the story of decline be the story you settle for, because the biology says otherwise. If you found this helpful, subscribe to the channel for more content about men's vitality after 40.